So I had a, I hate to say it like that, but I had a best friend. He was from Mexico, and he passed away when he was in where we were in our 30s. But he was from Mexico, and him and his parents were very close, and they would go to Mexico all the time, and they'd spend like months at a time. They'd be out there because they have another house out there, and his dad had a ranch, so they'd go out there or whatever. So the dad, he bought a new ranch, and he told him, let's go check it out, and he bought acres of it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was, you know, he was going to hire people,
And
plant
the whole,
whatever,
yeah,
the
yeah,
whole,
yeah,
yeah, the whole deal. But there was nothing on it. It was just, you know, the
land.
space. Yes, just land. And so he went with my friend's mom and his brother-in-law and her sister, and they went to go check out the property. So they started walking the property to check it out, and they had walked a good maybe half a mile, he
Mm-hmm.
says, according to his mom. And his mom, I believe his mom, she's not the type of person to lie. She's a very honest, hardworking, like she's a
It's
great
credible.
woman. Yeah, she's a great woman. And so that they had walked a distance from the house, and that off in the distance, like he turned around and he was like, sorry, he turned around and he was like, you know, I'm gonna go back to the house. And the brother-in-law's like, yeah, we're gonna go back, we'll be there. And she was with her sister, and they're just walking, and in the distance they see something, and they're like, what is that? And so they see it getting closer, and they're like, whatever. And they see it getting closer, and they're like, oh, it's a person coming over. And they're like, well, what are they doing out here? This is like the middle of nowhere. If you're in Mexico, there's certain like ranches that are just really big, and the property's huge, and it's cheap out there. So it's easy to buy land, and like it's kind of the desert, you know?
Yeah,
So they
it's
see this
undeveloped.
person. Yeah. Yeah. So they see this person. So they decide to wait. So they're standing there talking and stuff. They're talking, you know, having ideas about what they're going to do with the ranch. And they see this person coming, and it's getting closer. They're getting closer, and they're getting closer, and they're just standing there, and they keep looking back, and it's just a dark figure. And they don't see anything wrong. They're just like, oh, we'll see what they want, like see what's going on with them. They're by themselves, and the guys, they're still on their way back to the house. They could see them in the other direction in the distance.
Yeah.
And so they're waiting, and then they notice it's a woman, and she's all in black, and she's wearing a dress. So they're like, "Oh, she, you know, está de luto," and she's basically mourning and mourning. And so they wait still, and they're just waiting, and she's getting closer. But they notice that her feet are not touching the ground.
Okay.
She's gliding to them. And the sister's younger, she saw it, and she's like telling her, she was like, you know, she's está volando, she's like, she's flying. And she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, it's a mirage, because it's like the
Yeah,
desert,
it's the
right?
desert. Yeah.
It's a mirage. And she's like, no, no, she's gliding, she doesn't have feet, is what the woman's telling her. And she's like, what? And she can't see her well. And she's like, and she thinks she's joking and putting her on. And she tells her, she's like, no, she's gliding, like her feet are not touching the floor, like there's a space. And she's like, no, it's a mirage, like, you know, because a mirage can't do that.
Yeah.
But then as the woman gets closer, they realize her head is hanging to the side, and she is gliding towards them. So they run.
I bet they did.
They ran for their lives. And this woman, and according to her, she said as she turned back, she felt like she was just gaining on them. And she's screaming for her husband and her sisters, her brother in law, whatever. They're screaming, and they're like oblivious to it. And they ran as fast as they could. And by the time they got to the house, the men were already inside, and they didn't realize and they didn't hear them screaming at them. And that when they turned around before they got in the house, she was there. Like she was about to grab one of them.
Yeah.
And when they got in the house, she was gone. And that freaked me out when he told me, and then she confirmed it for me. She confirmed it for me, which was worse. And she told me that the lady was wearing very old clothes
Yeah.
from a funeral, like when you're buried, but very old Mexican
Yeah.
style. They
Tradition.
wear, yeah,
Yeah.
the traditional everything and that. But her head hung down to the side, and that she reached out to her, and that and they were she was gliding. She was gliding.
Yeah.
And I'm like, is it all in their minds? How do you see the same thing?
All of you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, not all of you, the two of them, because the men saw nothing and heard nothing. They didn't even hear them screaming at them because they were running towards the house, and the men are still headed in that direction, and they don't hear nothing. They heard nothing. They just went in and they saw them go in, but they're still way back here and they're
Yeah.
already in the house. So by the time they got to the house, the men were already inside. And that's, when they ran in is when they heard the commotion. They're like, what's going on? Because I was curious. I was asking her all kinds of questions like, where was your husband? What did he say? He didn't hear you screaming? Like, it's just, it sounds very far fetched, but I believe her. Just like I believe my mom has seen things. My mom, she used to tell me stories about what she saw growing up. And now, like, we're starting to see it on the internet. They're showing all these weird, crazy looking videos of these cryptids. And that's what they call them because is that what they're called? Because do you really know the name? Do
Yeah.
you really know their name? And there's all these different creatures out here. And